We are going to follow the money.
Everything you need to know can be understood with this simple phrase: follow the money. And believe me, that's what's happening.
Here comes the money.
Here we go. Money talk.
Here comes the money.
Welcome to College Sports Follow the Money, an all-new podcast diving into the critical issues surrounding the big business of college sports. I'm Andrew Monaco, joined by former president of Texas A&M University and former chancellor at the University of Missouri, Dr. Bowen Loftin, and former vice president and general manager of Fox Sports Southwest, Jon Heidtke. From NIL to the transfer portal and opt-outs, to the college football playoff, conference realignment, and more, we tackle the key issues facing college athletics today and into the future.
I need to feel you, Jerry! Show me the money! Jerry, you better yell! Show me the money! Show me the money! You love this black man!
We are back together once again. It is time for us to follow the money with Dr. Bowen Loftin and Jon Heidtke. I'm Andrew Monaco. So glad that you are with us. We are deep into February. There's always something going on, but first and foremost, saying howdy to both of you.
Howdy, Andrew.
Happy Valentine's Day, boys.
Happy Valentine's Day is right.
Yes, I'm ready for a big date tonight. My wife and I are going to join another couple and have a Valentine's dinner tonight. That's my way of hopefully buying a little bit of credit. My spousal approval points are very negative right now, so I need to buy some more points.
Time to put a little more in the bank right there, Dr. Loftin.
Well, but Jon has a real love over there. Jon, how's your girlfriend doing?
It's all good.
Not with her?
That and 3 little granddaughters and everybody else. It's all crazy. So yes,
some spoiling going on there. That's for sure. I know that. Definitely spoiling. And with it, Ash Wednesday, that means Lent's coming. So Andrew, who gives up for Lent, criticizing officials. So Easter can't get here fast enough. Dr. Loftin, let's start with you. The Pac-12, which is now 2, right? After this spring season comes to
over the Pac-2. That's the real question to begin with, Andrew. What's really going on right now is a very interesting set of events. Today, they announced that they've negotiated a departure for their commissioner. So he is no more. They notified all of the members, the 2 members they have, I think even also the 10 they used to have, about that this morning. And so that's in the wind right now. What an odd time to change horses, although one could argue that the horse they had wasn't carrying them very far. So that's out there right now. The real issue at the moment, though, is still the ongoing lawsuits involved. I mean, basically, the 2 remaining teams have won so far. They've been able to keep control of the conference, but they have an agreement with the other 10 about the future of the conference in terms of those other 10 still bearing some responsibility. Now comes along a lawsuit. We all know last year the Holiday Bowl sued the PAC about the fact they didn't play a 2021 game, and they then withheld the payment from the 2022 game to Oregon and to the conference for Oregon being playing UNC there. They withheld that to compensate them in part for the loss they incurred back in 2021, which was over $7 million at least. And so that's out there. Well, this last month, unbeknownst until yesterday, the PAC countersued and said, well, no, you owe us that money that you promised us for 2022. And by the way, you also have in our contract a guarantee of at least $3.4 million for 2021. We haven't gotten any from either one of those yet. So it's in litigation. I'm expecting a settlement to be coming out of this eventually. But the real question is going to be a thing called force majeure. You guys familiar with that legal term? It really means that something beyond the control of one of the parties went wrong, and therefore the contract is in abeyance because of that. So what the PAC is saying to the Holiday Bowl is, we had a thing called COVID back in 2021. In particular, for the bowl game, UCLA players had a lot of COVID problems, and that's why we had to cancel the game. We all know about that. And they're citing that as a issue of force majeure. And we'll see what a judge says or what the lawyers think the judge will say, which will lead to a settlement of some kind. So my guess is they'll figure out some compromise in the middle of all this and get it done before it goes through a lengthy trial. But it could be very interesting to see what happens with that. Meanwhile, there is this agreement between the leaving 10 and the remaining 2 saying the leaving 10 will actually guarantee, as appropriate, any revenue issues attendant to the future of the PAC for the next few years. So that's out there as kind of a backup for them, I guess. So if they don't get what they need from the Holiday Bowl, they may go and tax the 10 members who left to go elsewhere for some of that money to help compensate them for that. So we'll see. The saga goes on here. Meanwhile, we have no commissioner. Rumors are that the deputy commissioner, I don't know her. Do you know her, John?
Do not.
There's a deputy commissioner who's being talked about as the likely successor, at least on a temporary basis, to the last commissioner we've had. So we'll see what happens with all that. It is a very interesting saga right now that the PAC is putting us all through.
Dr. Loftin, those 10 that are going to the Big Ten, that agreement comes from the money from the Big Ten. It doesn't affect the other Big Ten schools, does it? Just the 10 leaving?
It's actually an agreement between the 10 members. Not all, of course, are Big Ten. We have a couple of ACC books as well, as you know. Cal and Stanford, and there's no there, and they're joining the 2 conferences, the Big Ten and the ACC. My understanding is there was no liability assumed by the 2 conferences, which makes sense to me anyway. And so that means they're on the hook. So the 10 schools who left are potentially on the hook for whatever the PAC might lose out on. But it's the language is there in their agreement. I've seen the language. It seems pretty solid, but it's not very long. We're talking about a phrase of like 10 words, okay? And so what that means in terms of possible litigation is unclear. If I were to go and tax Stanford and for example, for say $1 million, they might decide to pay a lawyer instead of me, and see what happens with that. So I'm not convinced that it's very enforceable because the language is very loose. I would expect a nice long paragraph with lots of good terms in there, but that wasn't the way that was written. So it's a pretty terse piece of their agreement on the departure of the 10 schools. And again, it comes down to what the lawyers tell the presidents and chancellors about this and how enforceable it might be and whether litigation might be a better route to follow. So I expect lots of litigation to ensue. Later on, we'll talk about the litigation, which comes in from the NCAA with Tennessee and Virginia. Another whole story we'll get to later on, maybe in this podcast.
Oregon State and Washington State have put themselves in a pretty good position. They're not panicking, right? They're actually in a decent position, and they're not going to jump somewhere. They're kind of going to give themselves some time. Monetarily, they might make out fairly well for a situation that looked very dire less than a year ago.
Well, we're waiting right now for more details about the Mountain West situation. It's clear they're going to play some games with the Mountain West. What's not been resolved is the specific details of all that. So we're still waiting for details about that. Whether the Mountain West wants to sort of cede its identity to them and let them form a new PAC out of this conference plus the 2 old members of the PAC. That's one possibility. Another is the Mountain West wants to preserve identity and go forward with some kind of a cooperation agreement. But the problem they have is NCAA will only recognize the PAC as a conference for 2 more years. There's a 2-year limit, or at least a 2-year buy period when you have a time to get back to your 8-member minimum you have to be a recognized conference. So there is a timeline on this. They can't just sit around forever without figuring this out. You guys may not know him. Kirk Schultz is the president of Washington State. I got to know him when he was actually, he came from Michigan State. He was the VP of research there. He then moved to Kansas State as their president as I became president of Texas A&M. So we got acquainted as kind of newbies on the block of the Big 12. And we got along very well. He was extremely good, good friend and a good colleague, and he is very sports minded. So he has been the PAC's NCAA rep, for example, things like that. So I have a lot of respect for Kirk Schultz, and I don't know the Oregon State guy nearly as well. So I'm looking forward to seeing how that plays out. But I think Kirk will do his very best to lead his school to a good place. I think the real problem is going to be geography, and the real problem is going to be crafting something with the Mountain West, the most logical conference to work with, that makes sense to the TV gods that we can talk to Jon about. How would TV people regard this thing, Jon? How would they see a Mountain West merger / cooperative agreement with the PAC in terms of the value of that?
Well, one of the old sayings at Fox back in the day was when we were at the Cotton Bowl is they said, please don't bring us teams that end in tech or state. So with a lot of techs and states in that group, I think it's going to be a bit challenged for them to, get a TV deal that's on par even with the Big 12 or the ACC. Having said that, there are enough other players out there that are looking for opportunities. So will they be able to get Big 12 money at the end of the day? Most likely not. But I think, again, it does put them ahead of whoever else is out there. And again, there are some, there's tonnage in those deals. And so, again, there are time zone issues that are important to people. So, again, I think they'll have some television, but if they just absorb the Mountain West deal, that's probably not going to be enough to feed everybody if that rights holder doesn't pony up a little bit more for them. And I think that's a combination of ESPN and CBS, but don't hold me to that.
What's interesting is you would say, first and foremost, you keep the Pac-12, it's more identifiable than the Mountain West. But the Pac-12 is kind of a tarnished thing now, right? So that's kind of the balance of, do you accept the Mountain West Conference moniker, or do you try to keep the history and tradition? But right now, it's kind of been like the punching bag in college sports. So I think just how your branding becomes something as well.
Stay tuned is all I can say. Stay tuned.
Now, the Pac-12 does have a stronger brand there. So I think, again, at the end of the day, that's probably certainly the moniker that I would want, whatever this new configuration looks like. And, then you start to work your way back up. And again, stranger things have happened. I mean, again, a UNLV, a San Diego State in that mix, it gives them a pretty good, the time zones on the western side of the country. There's some benefit there if they package it correctly. And again, it'll be, and that ties into some of these other things that are happening that we can get to on talking about television. And again, if you have multiple networks and they're looking to be part and parcel of this and want to invest in college, then that inventory becomes more valuable. And I don't know if this is the right time to get into this, but again, if you're just basically you have a duopoly and it's Fox and ESPN controlling all of college football, there's not a lot of value for other players then to get in there, and those conferences don't really provide a lot of value to either Fox or ESPN with their already commitments that they have there.
Jon, to go along with what the NFL did with Peacock getting a playoff game, with Amazon getting one next year, if you're on the outside of that duopoly that you talked about, do you also want a piece of that college football playoff with the 12 teams, if possible?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things we'll talk about with the word that's coming down now is that one of the current most valuable asset in the world of television sports media was the CFP extension and playoffs. And as the conference expanded to 12, that opened up some conversations about additional TV revenue putting in. Their deal runs through the end of, I think it's 24-25, and this new deal kicks off in 25-26. And there was a lot of thought that, again, the CFP let their exclusive negotiating window run out, which usually is a sign that they want to talk to all these potential people out there. And early on, I think, again, they talked with a lot of different people, Amazon, Warner Brothers, Google, Fox, all of these people, were very interested, I think, in that process. And again, to take it a step further back, if you're looking again at the NFL model, and we all agree that's a very successful model, to where the collegiate model is today. I did some numbers on the back of a napkin earlier this week. And if you look again, what the NFL is generating on an annual basis right now in television revenue is $12 billion, roughly. All right. That's their ABC, Fox, CBS deals. You add all those up, you're looking at about $12 billion a year. You look at the college world right now, and factor in some of these new deals that have just happened, again, the Big 12 or the SEC, Big 10, et cetera, the new CFP deal, it's somewhere in the neighborhood of $5 billion. So if you're looking at this and saying, okay, where could their value be in college football to get that $5 billion to get it closer to the NFL model? There's certainly a group. We pull football out, we create a new, superstructure for what that looks like. Then however many teams you get in there could make it different. NFL has 32 teams. What if this collegiate thing had 48? What if it had 60? And then you talk about there. And if you're able to then distribute the wealth of that inventory around multiple players and have the version of the Super Bowl or the CFP championship on other networks, they will all pay a pretty significant penny to be part and parcel of those conversations. If ESPN controls all of the championship games, does it loot your regular season to a little bit? Probably. I mean, if you looked at CBS this year, they made over, I think it was $500 million just in the Super Bowl with their television rights. But again, that part, every 3 years, they know they're going to get a Super Bowl. That helps them sell the rest of their inventory and create value. And as a league, it keeps you very healthy because you've got multiple partners who all want to have access to that marquee event. And again, so I was a little bit surprised from what the reports are that the CFP has done an exclusive deal with ESPN for the next, up to 2032. And I think, again, if the numbers are right, it's 1.3 billion, which is a pretty hefty sum. It's about, a 2.5, about times, I think, versus the 470 million that they were getting. But again, I do think, over time, that could limit some of the NBCs, the Peacocks, the Apples, the Foxes even to look to invest more in it, because if they don't have the championship game, that's a big part of not just the advertising conversation, but how you create your streaming packages too now, which all of these legacy media companies are involved with as well. So again, I thought interesting that it was an exclusive deal, because I thought the CFP would try to make sure they had multiple players out there, because that's only going to provide more value as time goes on, and not just have one potential network control everything, which would depress interest from other entities wanting to get into the fray at some point.
Especially when in the streaming deal, there's ESPN, Fox, and Warner Brothers coming together for its own service. That's even before the ESPN exclusive streaming service that is coming in the very near future.
Yeah, so that was a very interesting thing too, and to kind of let the viewers and our listeners know, one of the challenges in the streaming world right now is that the sports fans are irritated. All right, because back in the day, if you had a cable bundle, like it or not, you had all of basically the sports networks were part of that. So you plucked down your $100 and you had DirecTV or Spectrum or Charter, whoever it was. You really had access to everything. Today in the streaming world, you've got a playoff game on Peacock, you've got Paramount Plus, you've got there are a lot of different players out there. Thursday night games on Amazon. So if you're a sports fan, you want to get all that, you have to start to go to multiple entities to do that. And if you talk to a sports fan, or if you are a sports fan, we've all had that frustration about trying to find games where it wasn't as easy as it used to be. So now, guess what? These streaming services, or this particularly in the sports world, are trying to figure out, hey, how do we bundle this up again? Sounds a lot like cable TV, and that's exactly what it is. So what does a bundle look like that can bring you all the sports teams in there? And so I think that is one of the entity, or one of the benefits of what these networks are trying to do. And if you're Fox, you look great because you haven't spent a ton of your money trying to develop your own standalone direct-to-consumer model. And now your key content could be part of this. So you're not really losing anything. You're going to be gaining value from that because you haven't set something up. Over time, they could decide, do they want to go that own route as streaming becomes more prevalent and relevant throughout the country, which it only is going to is, but just how quickly does that happen from a business perspective? So again, I think that's interesting too, but we haven't got a price point on it. Probably I've been seeing numbers somewhere in the $40 to $50 range for that to get that. But then ESPN could still sell theirs a standalone entity. Peacock could still send theirs standalone. So it'll be interesting to see if that cannibalizes anybody else's interest out there. And I think one of the things that I read in the Fox report on this was Lachlan Murdoch said they're looking at this as an opportunity to go after that 10 to 15 million customers that are nevers. You've had people that were in the cable, the bundle, they've left. You have now people sort of in the skinny bundles, but there was a group of 10 to 50 million that never were in that space. They basically just stayed on broadcast television. Would this particular entity, who may be sports fans, have them want to pony up and get that process? So they're thinking that's where the growth is going to come from, that versus, having people just move around or stealing from Peter to pay Paul. So a lot of interesting things, and that caught everybody by surprise. Super Bowl weekend, they dropped that bombshell. I mean, all the leagues are going to, hey, what? Normally, if you do something like that with your partners, you kind of give them a heads up before you drop something like that. And again, interesting to see how this is all going to work out. And I think part of it was just to get the word out that, hey, this is an opportunity or an option out there. But again, I do think that the devil's in the details in all these things. And it'll be interesting to see how that all starts to pan out or play out as time goes on.
John, let's go back to the CFP just a little minute here. Who are the key players on the football team side of the equation, the committee side of the equation, that you believe were the key negotiators with ESPN and whoever else was trying to bid for this? Or can we identify who the key players are and were?
Well, I know it's the committee, right? CFP committee. So who the group is on that? They've hired certainly a consultant out there. I believe it was Endeavor as part of their group, and I believe Alan Gold was the running point on this for them. And he's very well respected, knows his stuff. Really, he's going to maximize those opportunities for you. So he was probably leading the charge on that. But again, as a consultant, you give your partners, you give your clients advice. They can take it, they don't take it. So it'll be interesting to see, how that all went out. But again, it does seem a little bit interesting to me that they had a chance to go to the market. Or the other thing maybe is the market wasn't as robust as it was. All right, you're seeing some of that issue. The media stocks are under pressure. The Wall Street has been happy with their returns on streaming so far. So some of those companies may have been precluded from putting significant bids out there. But again, that was still a big piece. And at one point back in the summer, we'd heard numbers as high as $2 billion for this new 11-game package. So it could have got there. So 1.3 is nothing to sneeze at, and it's again a huge number. But again, what does that do to them going forward up until 2020, 32? If you've got some of your other existing partners now may not be as inclined to want to continue to invest with you because they don't have access to some of the prime real estate, if you will. And again, you look at the NFL model, one of the reasons they're able to generate and create, they've got Fox and CBS share the Sunday windows. You've got NBC with the Sunday night window. You've got ABC, ESPN with the Monday night window. They've all turned those into franchises for them. And as well as now having the playoffs to be able to rotate through all of those people, the Super Bowl, for that matter. And now you've been able to dabble, a one-off with the additional expansion of the playoffs. You're able to sell a game or two to your streamers. So again, if you look at the NFL model, which is pretty smart in these negotiations, you would kind of think that the college, the CFP might have gone to something that looked very similar to that.
Well, John, one more question here is 12 going to be the permanent number? There's been a few people talking about going beyond 12, which could open up, additional negotiations or contract changes down the road. Is that even a possible pathway?
Again, seeing what the contract says, usually there's a change circumstance provision. If you add product, that you're able to negotiate for more revenue opportunities for that. So that's not an uncommon provision to be put into these arrangements. But I do think, again, if you look at whatever the larger number on that is again 32, 48, 60, whatever it is. If you get to 60 teams in this super division, the 12 is not enough. 18 maybe makes sense. All right. And so I think, again, if you're looking to maximize that inventory, you're going to want to have as many teams in that playoff hunt as possible, but not trying to mitigate what your regular season is. But in that world is, again, more playoffs, it creates more value and keeps teams interested. So I would certainly think, 12, if they add to that group, it's only going to get, it just would make sense that playoff portfolio would get bigger as well.
And what's interesting, what happened in the last couple of weeks is the Big Ten and the SEC are talking. That now is 36 schools. And you guys, when we talked about the Super Division I, my whole feeling was, you know what? This breakaway, they're not going to share. There's not going to be any reach out to the group of five any longer. So that, John, I think your point, Dr. Loftin, your point, what is going to be that number? And is 12 enough? Is 12 enough if it is just 37? That's a great point. The other thing on the horizon is the grant of rights in the ACC could change at a certain point. There's so many moving parts. That's what makes it, to me, absolutely fascinating. And again, when you have also in the last year, because you get to see how a game was on streaming, you get to see that, even by the old standards, 112 million people watched on CBS. That's over the air. That's still king of 120 something million. 112 watched on over the air. Now, when you start adding Paramount Plus and you start adding Nickelodeon and all that, it increases that number. But 112 in this day and age, that's the power of the Super Bowl, right?
Big number, right? Yeah.
And like you say, John, that's every 3 years. You know, you're getting that as a network.
Yeah. And even if your CFP only did 50 million, think about that. I mean, the most recent one did close to 18 million. But if you get to 50 million, all right, and this becomes a big event, which certainly it would, certainly qualify for over time. But again, the problem is if you're the NFL, now you look at this as college, you're having the NFC East negotiate their own deal against the AFC West. So, and then it creates, you don't get that volume, that the maximum benefit of having everybody leading toward this one, national championship game. So it just begs the question is the sooner that we get to whatever that model looks like, the better off we're going to be. And I think, again, you're seeing signs for that right now, again, by the SEC and Big Ten working together to try to address some of these issues. A lot of that could be legislative issues there on that front too, NIL, things, all that matter. But at the end of the day, again, if you look at, again, the NFL model and where college can be, I think, again, 12 billion versus 5 billion, a lot of room to get to that, to grow that number.
I find interesting in December, right? In November, October, in September, Saturdays are college football, Sundays are NFL. You've got those other special games. When college football's over, NFL likes to shift to those special Saturday games. Mm-hmm. Are they now playoff games? And does that now infringe on the NFL when it comes to scheduling? We'll see. There's the Black Friday game, obviously, that the NFL has, but the NFL always like to take advantage of that. With college football, that schedule going a little bit deeper. Might the college games be on Friday night, a possible bowl game? I don't know, but it's interesting. They kind of shared that month of December, and now college football with those important games there. It may lead to some hard feelings. I don't know.
No, and then you've got, again, your bigger games are going to be, or your marquee matchups are going to be the weekend games, your traditional windows, but you could have other games that still could help you have content on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays, like you see in the month of November with what some of the Power 5 conferences do, or with MAC, or whatever the group of 6, whatever they are now. So they're doing some of those things out there too. But I do think, again, the real value here is if you could create, again, whatever that number is. Again, I think it's probably more than 36 at the end of the day. Because if you could create that, your value that you're going to generate to create more revenue. And I think, again, if you look at that, that's the revenue that are going to need to be able to pay for these other, these other opportunities. Whatever your student athlete, employment opportunities look like. It's going to help you with NIL. It's going to help you fund your Olympic sports, so. Again, there's I think that the toughest thing facing the collegiate industries right now is they don't have a Roger Goodell type person trying to help them put all in a place and saying, this is where we need to get to.
There's the answer, John, right there. I see in the future a D1 plus, which is about 60 teams big, with a commissioner named Jon Heidtke stride the entire country.
I second that nomination. Going to tell you that right now.
But again, it's going to take something like that to maximize the revenue opportunities out there. And again, hopefully bring those and again, still keep college sports that we've all grown up to know and love in that same place. The last thing I think any of us want to do is see 60 teams or whatever that number is become just what the NCAA March Madness is. I think that takes away all the beauty of what that tournament does. And baseball and the College World Series now, how well the women's basketball Final Four is done. So a lot of great things that are going on out there right now, all around football. But again, the football has got to kind of, I think, it separate itself from the PAC and take advantage of what its popularity is in the marketplace and maximize those revenue opportunities.
Dr. Loftin, on our previous episode, you had some of the numbers from the 22-23, the income and the expenses. You've had the opportunity. There's more emerging data coming from those numbers, isn't there?
This is typical. What happens is USA Today and Syracuse in particular goes out and does FOIA requests to all the publics and tries to figure out what was the filing they did with the NCAA, which is required every year. And so our data rolling in right now is from the 2023 fiscal year, which covers 2022 latter half plus 2023. There's a lot of back and forth here, but of course I look at two schools always here in Texas. One is the one I'm sitting next to right now, Texas A&M, which reported a revenue of about $279 million for fiscal 23. Now, there's an asterisk by that. There is, including in that $279 million, a $12 million loan from Texas A&M University to its Department of Athletics. That hasn't happened in a long time. Back in my day as president, when Robert Gates was president of Texas A&M, and we just hired Bill Byrne, Bill negotiated a $15 million loan from President Gates to spend some money on what he wanted to see happening at Texas A&M, logos, improvements, things like that. And that was granted. That was inherited. That was never documented at that time, I might add. And then Dr. Monaco became president for a short time. And during her tenure, she actually codified that loan agreement with Bill Byrne and made it clear he was going to pay it back. I inherited that when I became president. And then we joined the SEC. And that cost us some lost revenue. You may know that A&M lost a little over $9 million of revenue from the Big 12 because of their departure to the SEC. And so I actually put a hold on Byrne's repayment of that debt for a couple of years. And so since that time, there has been no loan made by Texas A&M to its daughter in athletics. That's happened now, and that was reported in this 2023 fiscal year document to the NCAA. The state, and then Jeff Toole was actually interviewed by USA Today about this and made the comment that it's a loan, we're going to pay it back. He didn't specify what it was for. I'm going to guess. I believe what happened is that even though we achieved the goal for the capital campaign for the mostly south end zone at Kyle Field construction, there also was a matter of constructing a indoor track facility on the south campus, or west campus rather, and I think that probably is the why that $12 million was in there. And now they're going to pay it back, presumably. Of course, they got to pay somebody else alongside of that, former football coach here as well. But the real answer is that A&M reported in one measure the largest revenue in fiscal 23 to date that's been reported, probably the largest one we're going to see. Texas and Austin was at 271, about $8 million less than that. Their statement, interestingly enough, was that, well, this was a bit of an anomaly because we had a lot more revenue than we expected from the Moody Center, which is a new facility they've inaugurated in Austin. And that's ongoing. And that center is going to bring in money not just from athletics, people buying tickets to sporting events, but also for other things as well. It was designed specifically for a number of types of activities to occur in it. And so they're going to have ongoing revenue, but both campuses reported a very large increase in giving contributions, and A&M by far the largest, largely because of the Centennial campaign that was run by the 12th Man Foundation. It brought in presumably $125 million, primarily for additional football facilities at the south end of Kyle Field, but also alongside that was the need to move indoor track across the tracks to the West Campus, and that came in at a bigger number, I believe, than what was originally planned, and that probably explains the loan. I'll get more details about this as time goes on. That's what I've heard so far. So right now, I think you're going to see fiscal 23 ending up with A&M being the official top dog in terms of numbers, with an asterisk saying that some of that was a loan, which you could argue shouldn't be counted in the number. And if that's the case, then Texas may have that. Now, just a year before that, Ohio State was the winner by far, with a much bigger number than that one. And again, these anomalous things are tied to facilities and special things that aren't necessarily going to continue year after year. But what I'm telling you is this: athletics at the level you're seeing in the Power Five, especially the SEC and the Big Ten, is going to be generating $250 million a year, roughly, for its membership and within those two conferences, particularly going forward. And that includes the revenue coming in from the new Big Ten contract, and presumably a change in what the SEC gets as well, in terms of ability to distribute to schools TV revenue. So I figure 250 million and up is going to be the new sort of measure of the top teams in the country in terms of their revenue in athletics. We'll see.
That's not going to include all the Big Ten. Not all the Big Ten schools can generate that. Not all the SEC schools can generate.
The what do you think, John? 60 million per school we're talking about here going forward from the TV rights?
Yeah, I think so. That's a good number.
Yeah.
And it's only going to grow.
And it's been in the 40s, okay, for the Big Ten and the SEC, and then creeping to the high 40s, and now we're going to be in the 60s, okay? That's only a fraction of it. But what I saw, interestingly, in the data from A&M and Texas was the increases in revenue from sponsorships with facilities, with large crowds comes what? The ability to sell advertising, essentially, in a stadium. And that grew substantially at both Texas and Texas A&M year to year, comparing 22 to 23. Additionally, ticket sales went up. More people went to more games. And so that went up substantially as well. So you saw increases not just in the TV revenue from the conferences, but also in local revenue generated by sponsorships and ticket sales. And as facilities get bigger and we get more attractive winning teams to go to see, I see more of that. I mean, I predict that Olsen Field Blue Bell Park is going to be pretty full this season. I saw a pretty exciting bunch of young men today at the Dugout Club meeting I went to, and I think you're going to see a lot of butts in the seats, and that means ticket revenue. And guess what? My tickets cost more this year than last year. Funny about that.
That's never happened in the past.
Yeah, never at all. And my seat contribution went up too. Okay.
The beauty of Dr. Loftin, John, he's in that seat every game.
He is.
That's the beauty of that. See you everywhere, my friend.
I'm lucky to be a sports fan at a good time in history, and I'm married to a good sports fan, and so we tend to show up. Now, my wife was off riding today a horse while I was at the Dugout Club, but that still counts.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. I want right now, collegesportsftm@gmail.com. You are more than welcome to ask us a question. And we are looking forward to those, and we will answer those for you. We'd love to make this interactive for you. Anything else, my friends? This has been absolutely fascinating.
One quick add here, Andrew, if you could, and I want both of you to react to this. Tennessee was assaulted by the NCAA over NIL, which I find incredibly interesting that they would do it this way, and accused of pay for play. So they told Tennessee, you violated the rules, okay, and we're going to penalize you for that. Well, the result was a lawsuit by Tennessee and Virginia, joined by Virginia, against NCAA. And in that lawsuit, the first question they asked the judge who presides over this is, give us a temporary restraining order against the NCAA so they will not impose any penalties on us right now. And the judge actually didn't do that. So the NCAA sort of won this. But if you read what the judge said, it's so clear in the ruling that he gave that it's not that, sure, he didn't see a reason to give a restraining order. But he said in so many ways that there is a extraordinarily good case against the NCAA in terms of violating the Sherman Antitrust Act. If they try to control this in the current NIL world, that they're violating a very well litigated and established piece of law regarding antitrust. So this is just the first couple of volleys in this war right now between the NCAA and a couple of major schools, but you see what's happening here. And I predict we're going to see this go down the pathway here. You look alongside of that. There are lawsuits and National Labor Relations Board rulings already in play that are beginning to establish the position of a student athlete as an employee. Now, once that begins to take root, it's already happened at Northwestern University, a private school. I don't see the publics being very far behind in this regard. So look, put those things together. You have NCAA being told you're toothless because if you do anything real, you're going to be in violation of a major federal law. And over here, you must begin treating schools, your athletes, as employees. Now, I don't believe many athletes understand what that means. They think it just means dollars. They don't understand that labor relations are a whole nother world out there, and how they relate to their employer will be very interesting compared to how they related to their coaches in the past. So many unintended consequences here, guys. But I see these two things playing out over the next couple of years here, giving us fodder for our podcast, among other things, in ways that we can't really predict right now. We're going to see we already thought NIL and the portal were seismic changes in college sports, right? Well, more seismic changes are coming. The earthquakes are there. The earth is gaping. Okay, we're going to fall into these crevasses now. That's what I see coming over the next 2 years, guys, as these court cases, kind of wind them way out, but also the potential settlements that the NCAA and schools begin to engage in to get these things resolved in a rapid fashion. And then you have all this uncertainty about labor relations, and that may change again depending on who the next president is, because that's a driver of the NLRB. That group is appointed by the president, and that's now become a very much Democratic appointed group, and that might change or might not change in another year. We just don't know yet.
I find it fascinating that the NCAA did nothing about NIL, went to the states, and now they're jumping in.
Yes.
To me, I just finished the book of Joe Madden's book. And one of the things throughout that book is do simple better. Simply, they didn't do anything at first. I don't know.
No.
I was stunned when they said that about Tennessee. They also did something against one of the Florida Gators, one of the players that they did. To me, it's like, hey, you said we weren't going to be a part of this. The states wrote their own rules. Now you're coming in. I don't know. I don't know.
The irony is incredible here.
Yeah.
And the stupidity is incredible too.
Yeah. It's almost like one last gasp by the NCAA.
Well, we still just come in and settled the earlier lawsuits that occurred in a way that made sense. They could have negotiated a settlement with those suing them about name, image, likeness, for example, and gotten to a point of a workable solution that they'd have a major role in. But they just backed away and tried to fight it the wrong way in court, lost big time at several levels. And this is still ongoing, but my point is they simply did not do the right thing from a litigation standpoint to get to a better place. They could have, in my opinion, but they didn't. And now they're sort of coming out of the ashes trying to fight with little support underneath them right now.
Man, if only someone was teaching a sport management class, that would be a fascinating subject.
Got to find someone.
It's about time for you to ask us and me and Andrew to
that's right
for you, right?
I'm going to have you guys come in together and tag team it. We're going to have Andrew ask questions
and
be the moderator.
Together.
Yeah, that's right. We'll do a live podcast in class with the studio audience.
I'm loving this
I
idea.
love it too.
Now, John knows what my next question is. Who do I invoice?
I'm free.
That means Dr. Loftin's first. I still got to negotiate with this next president that is coming up. So
my internet's breaking up. Sorry, I didn't hear the last question, Andrew.
As always, a pleasure, my friends, and our thanks to Dalton Hughes as well for producing this. College Sports, follow the money. Again, collegesportsftm@gmail.com. Your questions will answer. Dr. Loftin, Jon Heidtke, thank you so much.